Furries have a lot of problems, especially conventions. There is one in particular though that doesn't get nearly as much attention, something that speaks more about online culture and what drives the decisions of some of the largest conventions in the world. Even if you're not a furry or don't go to these events, you probably know someone that does, and the people who are running them may have to change very soon. You probably remember BLFC 2021, the first recent furry convention that has received significant criticism for several controversies. This was many people's first look at a convention that received such negative attention, despite the many positive experiences that most attendees had. On top of all this, their poor response only added fuel to the fire. Many compared it to May 1st, 2015. They could be shut down, although that was quickly proven false with next year's convention dates being announced. You might think that conventions failing is a recent phenomenon, with the 2010 seeing DashCon, Fire Festival, and many other high-profile cases stemming thousands. However, conventions have been failing ever since they started. Before we can talk about that, we have to understand what a convention is. In short, it's a large meeting of people who come to a place for usually several days to talk about their shared work or other interests, or to make decisions in a group. You got conventions for every fan group, from anime, comics, gaming, science fiction, and yes, even furries. Some of them have gotten so large that their attendance numbers reached into the hundreds of thousands. No matter the size, all these fan events are run for the fans, by the fans. Many of these conventions are non-profit, meaning that they don't exist to make a profit. While some larger ones like New York Comic Con have turned to a for-profit business model, others like San Diego Comic Con continue to remain a non-profit. That doesn't mean they don't make money, with registration fees, merchandise, and many of the other events that happen, they certainly do. All the conventions have to pay for the venues, hotels, and many other services needed to run the show, and that's not cheap. These businesses aren't in it to provide services to host a fun event for fans. They're in it to make money. The difference is that the extra money that's left over after all expenses are paid isn't pocketed by the event organizers. Instead, it goes back into the convention to make it even better for next year. This is why they almost always don't accept refunds, as large amounts of these refunds would cause great financial harm, as our business is 100% community funded and we retain very little money year to year. With understanding how conventions work, we can now take a look at the first Furry convention, how it started, and how it failed. Picture this, it's 1989, the Nintendo Game Boy hits the market. The fall of the Berlin Wall marks the beginning of the end of communism, and a small event called Conference Zero was started in Southern California. Founded by Mark Molino and Rod O'Reilly, it was the first convention catered specifically for furries. Before then, fans of animals with human characteristics hosted small room parties at science fiction conventions, but there was never a place specifically for them. With Conference, they would now have an event that was separate from the science fiction crowd, a first for the Furry Fandom. The first convention, held over the weekend spanning January 21st to January 22nd in 1989, saw 65 attendees, and would only go up from there. As the years went on, the convention would see increasing attendance number as a result of the fandom growing, along with word-of-mouth marketing. It hit its peak in 1998 with Conference 9 at 1,250 attendees, but this won't last long. Divisions within the Furry Fandom, along with several factors, would see the end of this Southern California-based event. Some of the first signs of trouble for Conference started brewing a year earlier. In an open letter by Ed Klein directed at Mark Morello, he criticized the convention chairperson for encouraging non-furries to attend, many of them who were instead interested in a more suggestive experience. This led to reports of inappropriate behavior in the elevators, with Ed recalling that one of the gentlemen with me leaned against the wall when he found his side and pants covered in semen. You would think that security would be there to handle all these situations, but even they weren't doing their job. As I put it, what the hell is one of your security doing walking around in drag? While there is a time and place to dress of the opposite gender, doing so as security isn't one of those, with him knowing that it was, quote, immature and unprofessional. The media did not make the situation any better. Many reports of this event during this time painted as weird, which wasn't really surprising considering the public's negative view on geek culture during the 90s. Ed pointed out, quote, there were camera teams prowling in these areas who we discovered were not there for the convention's health, but evidently doing exposés casting furrydom in a negative light. This was one of the first seeds among the general public to one of the longest myths that persisted throughout the decades, the idea that furries are sexual deviants. Near the end of Conference existence, other furry conventions would pop up around the United States and abroad, eliminating the need to travel long distances to meet up. One of these was Furry Conventions, based in the San Francisco Bay Area, and the reason it was founded shows how bad of a situation Conference was in. It all came as a result of changing the location and date of the event, from Costa Mesa in the Los Angeles metro area to San Diego, roughly 78 miles or 126 kilometers away. Along with this, the date was changed from January to April. Obviously, if you regularly go to to an event, then all of a sudden they move to another city and change dates, I don't think you'll be happy about it. A lot of furries weren't, and with Furry Convention being held at roughly the same time in a more convenient location, it started becoming the more attractive convention, still existing to this day. As the years went on, Conference ended up becoming a shadow of its former self, losing attendees every year. In 1999, Mark Millennial stepped down as chairman, handing the title over to Daryl X. Line in a staff vote. From there, he unsuccessfully tried to revive the convention for the next 4 years, before shutting it down due to the high costs associated with running it. One of the reasons why Conference failed had to do with a lack of planning. You might see the similarities between Conference and BLFC. Both are furry conventions that grew quickly and were unable to handle the rapid increase of attendees. While I don't see BLFC going down the same way as Conference, the core problems still exist. Even today, with different technology and social values, this situation is similar to the one we had decades ago. That being said, I'd like to note that BLFC has still not released a statement 2 weeks after the incidents were first made public. However, they are continuing to remain active on Twitter, showing highlights of the convention along with giving out information for the next year. It appears that they're taking the ignore it and I'll go away approach, and it seems to be working. No matter where you stand at BLFC 2021, whether you thought it was an absolute dumpster fire or the best convention ever, I think we can all agree on one thing. They got the best advertising campaign a furry event has ever seen this year, and possibly all time. Southwest Airlines flight WN1212 was one of the more positive examples of this. A bunch of furries who attended the con were stranded in Reno for multiple days, and were saved by a flight headed to Denver. On that flight, someone had the bright idea of wearing their fursuits before he took off, and you probably know the rest. Even though the controversies have gone away, the underlying problems with BLFT have not. I'm not sure if they're running an investigation on what happened and how it got so bad, but considering the lack of communication, their tone-deaf response into a case of inappropriate touching, I wouldn't be surprised if they aren't. We can only hope that BLFT is changing behind the scenes, and urge that other furry conventions hold them up to a higher standard to protect not only the attendees, but also themselves. It has worked for Megaplex, and it'll continue to work only if demand the convention staff to continue creating the best experience for its attendees. If you need a recap of what happened with the whole pizza incident and all the other controversies at BLFC, check out this video right here.